Woody Allen said there are two types of people in this world, good and bad. The good sleep better, but the bad seem to enjoy the waking hours much more. Mark Twain is quoted as saying, there are basically two types of people who accomplish things and people who claim to have accomplished things. The first group, he added, is less crowded. And according to Henry Ford, the two kinds of people are those who think they can and those who think they can't. And he said, they're both right. People have been dividing people into two categories for centuries. It's even been said that the two types of people are those who divide people into two types and those who don't. So I'm going to throw my 2 cents in this morning. I believe there are two kinds of people in the world, at least when it comes to talking about God. There are those who worship a punishing God. They believe God punishes us for our own good. Some extreme examples are people like Pat Robertson, who declared Hurricane Katrina to be God's punishment of America for its sins, as well as Westboro Baptist Church, known for its pickets of funerals, claiming the deaths as God's punishment of our nation. And just hours after the deadly early morning shooting at Pulse nightclub, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick weighed in on the tragedy with a tweet from his own personal account, which read, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." Now, admittedly, these are people whose extreme distorted religious beliefs seem to be related to their large egos and their limited brain power. But there are still plenty of intelligent people who subscribe to the belief that bad things take place in the world because God has either caused the tragedy or allowed it to happen. Think of all the times you've heard, "What have I done to deserve this?" Or maybe the number of times you yourself have said it or thought it. So there are people who believe that death, disease, destruction, job loss, and threat of eternal damnation are God's ways of getting us back on the straight and narrow. And in fact, it's a belief that has steadfast roots in the Bible. But there is a second type of person who understands God to be a God of love and goodness. They see the Bible just as firmly portraying God as a God of grace and endless mercy, one whose boundless love extends to everyone. It's a message that repeats itself over and over in Jesus' parables, such as the ones of the prodigal son, the Good Samaritan, and the lost sheep. Jesus explicitly reminds us in his Sermon on the Mount that both bad things and good things happen to everyone, not as punishment to the sinner or reward to the saint, when he said, God makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. In this morning's text from Jeremiah, God commands the prophet to go down to the potter's house. And it would be there, in the common everyday activity of life, that God intends for Jeremiah to come to an understanding of how God operates in the world. So Jeremiah does what God commands and settles down to watch the potter do what potters do. The potter makes a container out of clay. Jeremiah watches as the creation slowly takes form under the artisan's steady hands. But then something happens. It may have been a flaw in the clay that caused it, or the potter may have sneezed, causing a hole to be knocked into clay. Whatever it was that happened, the potter felt it best to start over, start from scratch, and make a new beginning. And so Jeremiah, sure that he understood what God was trying to say to him through this tearing down and raising up of a new clay vessel, speaks his words of prophecy. The only problem is he sounds disturbingly like our own day's religious extremists. What he sees is a God who can and will destroy the nation of Israel unless they repent. Jeremiah seems to hear God telling him in the verses that follow this morning's text, "Look, I am a potter shaping evil against you and devising a plan against you. Turn now, all of you, from your evil way and amend your ways and your doings." With all due respect to one of the major prophets of the Hebrew Bible, I wonder if there wasn't a bit of static in the telephone line when he heard God speaking to him. Because I see something altogether different in this image of a potter reworking the clay into a new pot. I don't see a container being destroyed as much as I see a new and fresh masterpiece under construction. I see God present in the image of the potter, but not as a harbinger of doom and gloom. Anyone who does hasn't stuck around for the ending, because if they did, they would see God reshaping, remolding, and transforming the lump of clay into something beautiful and strong, not flawed at all. I see the potter creating something new when I see God working in the life of transgender people who are determined to shape and remold the way they present themselves to the world in a way that matches their true gender. I see the potter shaping a piece of mud into something beautiful when I see God supplying the gay man, the lesbian, and the bisexual person with the courage to come out of the closet and live their lives authentically, out and proud of who God has created them to be. I see the potter transforming a soft lump of clay into a piece of strong and useful pottery when I see God offering hope to the homeless youth through something like the Cove to become a college graduate. Some see the glass half empty, and some see the glass only waiting to be refilled. Some see a God who punishes us for our misdeeds, and others see a God whose grace is boundless. Some see only the cross as a sign of their faith, and others see the empty grave. Some see God in natural disasters, and others see God in the people who respond to the victims of those disasters. Some see death as the ending of life, and others see it as the beginning of a new one. Some see their lives marked by one challenge and tragedy after another, and others see themselves as under construction. It's easy to blame God when things go wrong in our lives. It's convenient to assume that God is just smashing us down like the potter did to the clay. That seems to be what Jeremiah believes. Jeremiah sees God present in the disasters of life. But it's worth noting that the word translated as potter here is based on the more general Hebrew verb, which means to fashion and form. It's the same verb that's used in the 2nd chapter of Genesis when God kneels in the dust, grabs a piece of moistened clay, breathes into it, and fashions from it a human being. I want to challenge you to look for God in the places of renewal and transformation in your life. When everything seems to be going wrong, understand that we are nothing more than works in progress. Our lives are under construction, and the best is yet to come. God is a potter who isn't satisfied until each lump of clay reaches its full potential. A potter that's proud of the masterpieces that have been created. My prayer is that you also see God as a loving, creative artist, a God of hope and resurrection, a God of transformation and renewal, a God who spoke later to Jeremiah, but a little more directly, saying, "Surely I know the plans I have for you, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope." There's a story in the Hebrew Bible about Moses, who, after having given the law of God to the people of Israel, finishes up by saying to them, "I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life." We have the same sort of choice. We have a choice of how we see life and how we see God's participation in our lives. We can see God as a sinister deity lurking in the background waiting to trip us up. Or we can see God as a God of endless grace and forgiveness, a God of resurrection and renewal. We've got a choice of a God of blessings or a God of curses, life and death. Choose life. Amen.